June 1942. The Pacific Ocean is vast, and 6 months prior, the backbone of the U.S. Navy, its massive battleships, had been devastated at Pearl Harbor. Since that morning, the Imperial Japanese Navy had steamrolled across the water. Island after island fell to a force that appeared entirely invincible. The architect of this naval supremacy was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. His strategic intent was absolute: destroy the remaining American aircraft carriers, and the Pacific Ocean would belong to Japan. Yamamoto devised a massive trap. He sent 4 of his elite fleet carriers to attack a tiny American outpost called Midway Atoll, forcing the U.S. Navy out into the open water to defend it. But the Japanese fleet was sailing with a massive blind spot. In a basement in Hawaii, American cryptanalysts had secretly cracked the Japanese naval code. United States intelligence knew exactly where, when, and how the strike would unfold. Instead of walking blindly into a trap, the U.S. Navy quietly positioned 3 of its own carriers in wait to launch a counter-ambush. The stage was set for a massive collision. On one side, an overwhelming armada. On the other, an outgunned American defense leaning entirely on a fragile piece of intercepted intelligence to survive. On the morning of June 4, 1942, Japanese bombers roared into the sky and pounded the Midway Island defenses. Out on the open water, miles away from the bombardment, the tension was suffocating. American scout planes scoured the endless horizon, desperately hunting for the Japanese fleet. Hours passed before a scout broke the silence, finally spotting the enemy ships. The American carriers immediately launched their strike groups into the air. The first wave to reach the Japanese fleet was a squadron of American torpedo bombers. To drop their payload, these planes had to fly slow and dangerously low over the water, heading straight into the teeth of the massive ships. The attack was a complete disaster. Japanese fighter patrols easily descended on the slow-moving Americans, shooting down the exposed torpedo bombers one by one until almost the entire squadron was wiped out. For a brief moment, it appeared that even knowing the exact location of the enemy wasn't enough to overcome the sheer firepower of the Japanese fleet. But the loss of the torpedo bombers had created a specific opening in the Japanese defense. Descending to sea level to intercept the torpedo bombers, the Japanese fighters left the high-altitude airspace totally unguarded. Below, the Japanese ships were rearming. Their flight decks were packed with highly explosive bombs, ammunition, and exposed fuel lines. High above this scene, squadrons of American dive bombers broke through the clouds. Because the Japanese fighters were occupied at sea level, the bombers arrived perfectly positioned and entirely unseen. The dive bombers pushed into steep descents. Within a 5-minute window, they rained armor-piercing bombs onto the volatile decks below, setting the Akagi ablaze, then the Kaga, and the Soryu. In 300 seconds, the combination of an unguarded sky and cluttered decks had dismantled Japan's carrier strength. The battle wasn't quite over. The sole surviving Japanese carrier, the Hiryu, managed to launch a desperate counterattack that heavily damaged the USS Yorktown. But American forces quickly located the Hiryu in return. Dive bombers swarmed the isolated ship, bombarding it until it slipped beneath the waves at sunset. Over the course of just 24 hours, the Japanese Navy lost 4 of its elite fleet carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and irreplaceable generations of highly experienced pilots. This loss stopped Japanese expansion. The United States seized the initiative, beginning a steady, island-by-island push westward for the rest of the war. Midway finalized a shift in naval power. The battleships that had burned at Pearl Harbor were the weapons of the past. Victory now belonged to whichever side could control the sky. A battle fought in the middle of nowhere proved massive military force can be dismantled by precise intelligence, by individual courage, and a 5-minute window of opportunity.